that we have on the oh, got it. The limited amount of data that we have on the University of Hawaii system based on some pilot studies that Rainbow and I and a graduate student, Elise De La Cruz Talbert, did a few years ago. So let's dive into this. So I'm going to be talking about student basic needs, insecurity with a kind of an emphasis on food, but let's cruise into this. First, let's define what we mean when we say food security, okay? Food security is defined by different organizations somewhat differently, but this is a generally accepted definition: when all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their food preferences and dietary needs for an active, healthy life. If that is not the case for you or your family, then you could be technically defined as being food insecure. And there's some sub-definitions that I want to get into, because this is actually something that's measured. So the US Department of Agriculture measures household food insecurity on an annual basis, and they've been doing it since 1995. And there's very strong data on food insecurity in the United States and in every state in the US, okay, including Hawaii. And there's debates about how accurate the data is, and is it truly representational? I have some questions about it, but anyhow, I'll show you the data that we have available. Okay, and again, I will send this PowerPoint to you folks, and you can check out some of these URLs as you have time. Okay, so the way that it's measured, so the US Department of Agriculture has an outfit within the USDA called the Economic Research Service. And there's a group of social scientists who do economic and kind of social science research of different types. And they break down food security in specific ways. So they have a survey instrument that goes out on an annual basis. And depending upon a household's response to the survey, they categorize those households as being either food secure or food insecure. Okay, so there's often it's a 15-question survey. So depending upon how many you check off in terms of affirmative response that there are some challenges that you face in terms of accessing adequate amounts of safe, affordable food, it's going to put you in a certain category. Okay, so high food security is basically there's no reported indications of food access problems, right? Marginal food security is when you're responding to the survey instrument and you're checking off that you're facing some limited amount of access issues, okay? So you may be experiencing a certain amount of anxiety, running out of food at the end of the month, or money to purchase food at the end of the month, but you're really not changing your diet or your food intake. Does that make sense? So this is how the USDA defines a household as being food secure or food insecure. So if you're filling it out and you're reporting multiple issues in terms of reduced quality of food that you or your household is consuming, reduced variety or desirability, then it starts to identify you as being in a food insecure household. Okay, and if you're checking off multiple boxes indicating that your diet is disrupted, you're eating less, your patterns are disrupted by a lack of resources, and you may be even losing weight, then you start to be defined as being in a very low food security situation. Does that make sense? So it really depends on how you respond to this survey instrument, and the USDA categorizes you based on how you've responded. Okay, so we're getting into some of the technical details. Again, if we go up, let's see, what is going on here? There we go. So this is the kind of generic definition. And then this is how the USDA categorizes households as being food secure or food insecure. Everybody with me? Just give me kind of a thumbs up if we're tracking. Okay, cool. Yeah, please jump in if I've confused you. Okay, so we'll keep going here. And so what I'm, again, just these are the the kind of various categories that the U.S. Department of Agriculture uses to classify households as being food secure or food insecure. The blue line separates food secure households from food insecure households, okay? And what I want to do is show you some data based on those lower two groups, okay? The low food security households and very low food security households, where you literally are seeing people who have inadequate access to safe, quality, affordable food, and in very low food security households where dietary patterns are being significantly disrupted. Okay, so let's dive into the data. Okay, as I mentioned, and this is relatively current data set, as I mentioned, it goes back to 1995 when the USDA was regularly measuring this. Okay, so we have data, annual data from the US Department of Agriculture tracking household food insecurity in the United States, every state in the nation. So survey goes out, phone calls go out, and they ask these people these 15 questions, and people check off the boxes, and then they categorize them as I've described. Okay, it fluctuates through time. Household food insecurity or food security rate changes through time. And one of the things you see delineated here is that in 2007 and 2008, you see a significant spike in household food insecurity. Why would that be? Some of you might be too young for this. Any ideas? Why would there be a spike in household food insecurity in 2007 and 2008?
The recession.
That's right. That's the Great Economic Recession. So I make this point because it's really, economics. It's what is the purchasing power or the wealth of the household that is the key determining factor in terms of who is food secure and who is food insecure. Does that make sense? And so during that time period, just so you understand this idea and what's driving this phenomena of household food insecurity, is that in 2007 and 2008, you had a profound economic contraction and people lost their jobs. So their income dropped. And at the same time, the price of goods and services, including food, went up because petroleum prices went up significantly. And because food is so tightly coupled, industrially produced food, which is most of the food that we consume, is so tightly coupled to petroleum, the price of petroleum, food prices went up significantly. So price of gas, price of food, price of heating oil, everything went up significantly. Okay, so that created a real pinch on people's household budgets, where they were having a difficult time affording anything, including food. And so people were cutting back on the quality, quantity of food that they were consuming. Does that make sense? So it's economics that is driving food insecurity. And I'm going to kind of keep reiterating this. It is really the number one driver of household food insecurity is where you fall relative to the national poverty line. That is the number one predictor of food insecurity. And why is this a factor in the student body? Well, because this, and I'll spend some time, we can talk about this. It's a really fascinating issue, especially those like yourself who may have just graduated from college. One of the key explanations, I'm just kind of jumping ahead here in terms of student household food insecurity, is that people are often the first time on their own. They're the first time they're financially independent. And what has happened over the last 40 years, to kind of get into some sociological analysis, is that middle class and working class wages in the United States have stagnated over the last 40 years. Meaning there's been a shit ton of money being made over the last 20 years by the upper class, the economic elites. But those in the middle class and working class, and perhaps you would fall within that category, the amount of money that working class and middle class families is making has not increased. It has stagnated. At the same time, cost of housing, cost of childcare, cost of college tuition, cost of just about everything has significantly increased. Does that make sense? And so when households send a kid to college, often they are not in a position to sponsor their child to attend college. And when the kid goes out into the world for the first time, they're paying exorbitant tuition fees and maintaining their overhead for housing and all the other things. So what has happened is the cost of everything has gone up, but income for the middle class and working class has not increased to compensate for those rising prices. And so that makes it much more difficult for people to maintain a quality diet while they're in school. And in some cases, not just that, but maintain a house over their head and maintain healthcare and other types of essential services. So again, it's the economic situation that many people, whether they're in college or they're not in college, is driving food insecurity, as we've been talking about, but also driving basic needs insecurity in the student population. Okay, so to continue here is, after the 2007-2008 Great Economic Crisis, household food insecurity remained fairly steady and high for many years, but as there's been an economic recovery, then that's why you see that trend line moving down. As people have regained employment, then of course their income level goes up and they can afford more food, and including higher quality food. Does that make sense? So that's why the trend line is going down. Okay. But it's important to point out that despite the fact that we are, one of the wealthiest nations in the world, and we have the most industrialized, highly productive food and agricultural sector anywhere in the globe, we still have tens of millions of people who cannot afford adequate amounts of safe, affordable food to live a normal, active, healthy life. Does that make sense? Okay. So we have this kind of profound contradiction. As a scholar of the food system, I believe we have this profound contradiction where we have this incredible industrial food system, overproduces food, we export millions of tons of surplus commodities around the world, and we still cannot feed our own population. Tens of millions of people. So this data trend takes us to late 2018, early 2019. Right? This is pre-COVID-19. So what would you expect that trend line to do at 2020? That's right, Navin. It skyrockets. It's going to replicate not only what we saw in 2007 and 2008, it's going to exceed it by a significant margin. Okay? So again, the same or a similar set of phenomena has conspired to create rising rates of household food insecurity. COVID-19 has forced the closure of many businesses. People lost their jobs. Their purchasing power has been compromised. Therefore, they cannot afford the abundant food that's in the marketplace. It's not a matter of inadequate production. We're still producing enormous amounts of food, but people cannot simply afford the food that is in our marketplace. Does that make sense? I know I'm kind of hammering this point, but if you understand that, you can also understand the nature of famine around the world. We're not talking about famine here, we're talking about household food insecurity. And the reason that we have food insecurity as opposed to famine is because in the United States, as part of a wealthy nation, we have a social safety net below which many people will not fall. But in other less developed countries, when you have an economic contraction like we're having here, and they don't have a social safety net, that's when you see true famine. Because what's happening in other countries, and you may be reading about this, is there are significant numbers of people, hundreds of millions of people, who live in countries without a social safety net. And when they lose their job and food prices go up, those are the people who suffer true deprivation. Okay, I'm going to pause there and make sure that I haven't lost anybody. Are we good? Okay, thanks for the thumbs up, that's helpful. Okay, so let's keep going. So this is characteristics of households with low and very low food security. Again, I'm pulling directly from the US Department of Agriculture. This is their data, and I will drop the URL to the Economic Research Service food security site in there. So if you're food secure, you can see that it's indicated by the green. Frequently, people aren't worried about that food is going to run out. Infrequently, the food that they bought did not last. But if you start looking at low food security household and very low food security household, you start to see the percentage of those households who are experiencing these types of phenomena, where they're worrying about food running out, their food doesn't last, they cannot afford quality meals, they're skipping meals, they're skipping a large number of meals. You know, they're eating food that they felt like they should not. They're experiencing hunger, and they're still not eating. They're losing weight, right? So this is the set of circumstances, just to kind of give you a sense of what people are actually experiencing who are very low food security, low and very low food security status. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is a serious issue, and especially, I mean, it's true for everybody, but it's particularly concerning if you're talking about a student population who's trying to study. If this is your daily experience, and it is for many young people in college, if this is your daily experience, it is very difficult and extremely stressful on you. And there's lots of research that now shows that students who are food insecure and basic needs insecure have a very difficult time completing their studies. Their grade point average is a significant, there's a significant difference in terms of lower grade point average, and their graduation rates are actually lower. Okay, so that's in addition to just being concerned about people being food insecure, it also impacts our ability to progress through higher education. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Again, just raise your hand or chime in. So because this has been studied for such a long period of time, and they collect demographic information on people who are food insecure, and they can do these correlations, there's certain populations of people that we know are consistently food insecure, right? They can serve as predictors, right? And you can see them called out here in terms of the length of the bar graph. Single women with children. If you are a single woman with a child, the likelihood of your being food insecure is extremely high. Okay, and there's other quote unquote risk factors. If you are Hispanic or Latinx, or if you're African American, the likelihood that you are food insecure is pretty high. Okay, but the single most powerful predictor is what is your income. Okay, and if you fall below 1.85 times the household poverty line in the United States, then that increasingly becomes a predictor of your household being food insecure. Does that make sense? So single women with children, Black and Latinx communities, and low-income households. That is, households whose income is below 185% of the federal poverty line. And that may be a little bit confusing, but I've added some notes down to the bottom. The federal poverty line is about $26,000 for a family of four in 2019. Okay, 185% of that $26,000 is $47,000. So if you are a family of four and you're making less than $47,000, then the likelihood of your being food insecure is quite high. And if it falls below that $47,000 by a significant amount, then it is the single largest predictor of household food insecurity. Does that make sense? Okay, so your race, right? Whether or not you have children, and your kind of socioeconomic position are the key predictors. We're good? Again, there's other data that the USDA has collected, I think that's quite fascinating. You see higher rates of, sorry, this is a little bit small, but the key is the red, very low food secure, and orange is low food secure status, and then the blue bars represent food secure status. If you have less than a high school education, you're likely food insecure, right? If you have a high school education, then the likelihood is slightly less. If you have a college education, and this is in the general population, right? So higher education often enables people, once they graduate, to make more money, and therefore, with that additional money, that population of educated people tends to be more food secure. And then there's similar data on employment status and disability status, right? People who are unemployed tend to generate less revenue, and those who are disabled and not in the labor force often generate less revenue, and so they are frequently in a food insecure status. Does that make sense? So much of food insecurity is tied to, they're talking about disability, but if you think about it, it's because people who have some kind of disability, they're often not in the workforce, and therefore they're reliant upon some federal or state social safety net for their income, and that income is limited, and therefore they are food insecure. In addition, of course, mobility may also be an issue that can constrain people's ability to gain access to the type of foods that they might otherwise consume. Okay, so there's lots of data on what is the population who is food insecure and not. Okay, and this is, I've been talking about national data, but it's important to understand that there are populations within Hawaii that are more food insecure than others. And this is kind of summarizing not just food insecurity, but differential rates of chronic illness in the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander community. You see that in addition to very high rates of food insecurity in the Native Hawaiian population. And again, do we have a theoretical reference for this? Yes, often it is low-income communities of color that have been historically marginalized, that have had less opportunity for social mobility, and therefore they are kind of placed in a position of low income or poverty status. And as a result of that, then their food security status is often low. So they have high rates of food insecurity. So food insecurity in the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander population, as measured by the Department of Health in 2015, is 35, approaching 36%, when the state average of household food insecurity for that same year was around 11 to 12%. So there's a significant difference, almost 3-time difference between the state average household food insecurity rate and the Native Hawaiian population. Okay, that's an issue of significant moral concern for me and for many others. That is an indicator of a profoundly inequitable food and agricultural system. So let's keep going. Jumping into specific data on the student population. So one of the instructors that we had at West Oʻahu for a period of time was a PhD student by the name of Elise Dela Cruz Talbert. And part of her PhD dissertation, she did a study of food insecurity in the UH West Oʻahu student population. And this is what we found. About 41% of student respondents reported experiencing some form of food insecurity within the previous 12 months. Okay, that's significantly higher than the state average for that year as measured by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So over 40% as opposed to the national average of 7 and the state average of approximately 12. So, and this is a consistent trend, folks, is that rates of basic needs insecurity and food insecurity in particular are often much higher in the student population. Does that make sense? Many times higher. Okay. Women, again, report having higher rates of food insecurity, so it's higher than men. That 41.25% that we found at West Oahu is consistent with national data. Okay, so it's not an outlier. So it may be shocking to you that 40% plus of our students at West Oahu reported being food insecure. That is actually pegged almost precisely to the exact figure that other research involving over 100,000 students from campuses all over the US have found. Okay, so if you take that number, if what the West Oahu rate of food insecurity is representative, and I don't know that it is, but we have indications that it is, that means of our 50,000 students, approximately 20,000 of them are food insecure. That is a lot of people in our system struggling to get by and study in a situation where they may not be gaining adequate access to enough food to succeed in college. That's a major issue of the University of Hawaii, and it needs to be contended with. And that's the work that Rainbow and I are now actively involved in. Is this number, to anybody, is this surprising that the food insecurity rate would be that high? Remember, the national average is somewhere around, let's just say 12 to 13% before COVID-19. Now it's up closer to 25% because of COVID-19. Keep in mind, this is in 2000, and we did this in 2016. Yeah, pre-COVID-19, 40% of students experiencing food insecurity. Is that surprising to anybody? Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, yeah. I had a hard time accepting that was the rate of food insecurity. I had a sense it would be high, but I didn't realize it would be quite that high. So let's go to recent studies. So there's an organization called the Hope Collaborative and a scholar by the name of Sarah Goldrick Robb. And she's really been a pioneer of kind of basic needs security research all over the US. And so they've done numerous national studies. And this is what they're finding. And I'm going to principally be talking about the basic findings of this research that they've done. So they're looking at both 2-year and 4-year colleges. Okay, and at the above the blue line, the thing that I want to point out is they're identifying at 2-year institutions what percentage of the students that they've surveyed are basic needs secure, and at 4-year institutions, what percentage of students are basic needs secure. And what they found is 30% at 2-year colleges and 40% at 4-year colleges. That means the inverse, if you look at the next bar graph beneath it, that means about 70% of students express some form of basic needs insecurity, whether they are food insecure, housing insecure, or homeless. 70% of the respondents to this national survey said they experienced some form of basic needs insecurity. And at 4-year institutions, it was slightly lower at 61%. That's a crisis. That's a crisis in higher education if we're dealing with such high numbers, where 70% of students in community colleges around the United States are experiencing some form of basic needs insecurity. And in many instances, it's multiple forms of basic needs insecurity. That is not a recipe for succeeding in higher education, knowing the rigors that you guys have all experienced through your college education. Okay, so super important. I'm not going to get into the other stuff below the blue line. I just want to give you a sense of the national research that's done is indicating extremely high rates of basic needs insecurity in the student population. Okay, so let's break it down into actual numbers here. So the study that they've done, multiple studies that they've done over 5 years, and that included, there's a little summary under the picture, 171 community colleges, 56 four-year colleges, 24 states, 167,000 students were involved in the survey. Okay, so they have a very large sample size. And what they found, about 40% of students were food insecure, 46% were housing insecure, and 17% of those respondents were homeless in the previous year. That's the national landscape as of 2019. Okay? That's a lot of people who are experiencing some form of basic needs insecurity. Okay, and they're finding that despite the differences in institutions all over the United States, the findings are consistent across time and place and institution. Okay, so our numbers at UH West Oʻahu, I think, are reinforced by this idea that at a national level, they're finding at many other universities, about 40% of students are experiencing food insecurity. Okay, and as mentioned, it impacts our performance in college, clearly enough. Okay, so sorry, I'm taking a little bit longer than I anticipated. COVID-19, of course, has only exacerbated that because many people, many families have lost their income and maybe not in a position to provide any kind of financial support for their children who are in college. Or if you are a self-supporting student, you may have lost your side gig that enabled you to have some revenue beyond perhaps your financial aid package that you may have received. Okay, so the COVID-19 has had a significant impact on household food insecurity. And to go over some of the basic data, there, as of 2021, they're measuring, these are kind of shorter term studies. This is not USDA Economic Research Service. This is a range of other research outfits that are putting this data together. But they're estimating about 23% of all US households. Remember, the USDA had identified somewhere around 11 to maybe 12, 13%. So that number, as a result of COVID-19, has doubled. The rate of household food insecurity as a result of COVID-19 has doubled. Okay? So households with children, more significantly impacted, as those who do not have children, them buggers are expensive. They cost a lot of money. You know, my whole champagne budget has dropped off precipitously because of my kid. I'm mad. Kids are expensive. When you have a kid, it makes it more stressful in terms of the household budget. Okay. So anyhow, the numbers indicating now somewhere around 27 to 30% of households with children are experiencing food insecurity. That's a very large number of people, and many people in college, returning to college, have children, and they're juggling a household with a child while being in school, and they may have lost their job, and that is precipitating this significant crisis. So I'm going to stop talking here in just a second. So in response to this understanding of this crisis in higher education and how it's being amplified by the COVID-19 pandemic, a couple years ago, Elise and I and Rainbow and others made a number of recommendations to the Office of the President. Our president, his name is David Lasner. David Lasner, upon our recommendation of forming a permanent committee to address these issues in the student body, we made the recommendation to form a permanent committee. So we formed that permanent committee. I now chair it. Rainbow is our coordinator for all 10 campuses across the system. And our agenda is to conduct research, education, fundraising, and programming to address basic needs and security in the system. So if we go to, I don't know if this will actually work. Hey, look at that. Okay, what we just launched, and many of you may be familiar with this if you're in the UH system, is Rainbow and I and others put together this basic needs website. So this is the first time that the University of Hawaii has had a one-stop shop clearinghouse. And so the University of Hawaii basic needs site does a number of things, but principally for a student entering it, it explains what food insecurity is, and that you may be experiencing food insecurity, and that's a common experience for many students across higher education. It then takes a student to a map of the entire state and all the University of Hawaii campuses. If you are a student at Kapi'olani Community College, you can click on this. Hopefully this
Hi,
will
Albie.
work.
I just want to pause you real quick. We can't see your Safari screen. We can only see your PowerPoint.
Oh, you can't. Okay, that's weird. Let's see here.
But I did put the link in the chat.
Okay, so I'll just, if you guys open that up, I will kind of quickly guide you through it. So go ahead and open that link. And then from there, that main student basic needs site, you scroll down and you can, let's all just click on Kapi'olani Community College and the red dot. Everybody there? Yeah, give me a thumbs up. Okay, and then under Kapi'olani Community College, there's hyperlinks to principally on-campus resources that students can access if they're experiencing food insecurity. They have need financial help or health services, or they need housing and shelter or other related resources. Okay, if there's not something on the individual campus that they can access, then again, under Kapi'olani Community College resources, under food assistance and other forms of assistance, the last link is called findhelp.org. Can you click on that? So hit findhelp.org. And findhelp.org is a search engine. Think of it as a basic needs search engine. And all you need to do is type in whatever your zip code is, 96822. I live in Manoa. And so type in a zip code, and then it pops up a comprehensive clearinghouse of information on food, housing, goods, transit, healthcare, money, education, work, legal assistance in our community, in our state, and even national resources. Okay, does that make sense? You guys tracking that? So this is something that literally we launched just a couple of weeks ago at this point, and it's intended to help students who may be in different forms of crisis, or yourselves if you need assistance. So it's open to students, but also there's a publicly facing findhelp.org that doesn't require any kind of login information. What Rainbow and I are doing now, and this is something we may pull you guys into, is helping us populate this database, and we'll talk about that at some later date, to make sure that every community asset that might help students fulfill their basic needs is integrated into this database. The findhelp.org search engine is relatively new to Hawaii. There's lots of state resources and federal resources, but it may be missing some very specific community-based resources. Does that make sense? Okay. Rainbow, you want to say anything about that?
Sure. One of the really good things about findhelp.org, and one of the big reasons why we decided to partner with them, is the fact that we on our end are able to kind of collect metadata and track what types of things students are looking for. We're really allowed to see what the best support, is it food assistance? Is it housing? Is it nutrition? Are those things that students are interested in? Are those things that students need? And then, as well as even on our student basic needs website, we have the campuses split up so that you can actually provide, some of these things are system-based, like the broadband information, that's system-based. But at the same time, we have resources that are specific to each individual campus that anybody from the campus could look at and see. So that's the idea of findhelp.org and the Student Basic Needs website.
Great, thank you, Rainbow. Last thing, I'm just gonna share my screen just for a second. I'll wrap up, and then you'll be done with me. So these are some of the kind of generic priorities that our UH System Basic Needs Committee has identified. So launching this, I'm going through this bullet pointed list here. The UH Student Basic Needs Clearinghouse, that's what we just showed you. We may pull you into some programming as time allows and your campus is authorized to help us with orientation to that basic needs site. That's a great way to connect students to critical resources in their community. Rainbow and I and others in the system are working to get faculty members to add a basic needs statement to their course syllabi. So students are constantly being referred to this basic needs site. If you are in the UH system, you probably saw this in La Lima. It was a pop-up window when you came back from spring break. We're going to be working on connecting students to federal assistance. That's a supplemental nutrition and assistance program. That's the former food stamps. So we're going to be working on kind of scaling our outreach and orientation to that. Rainbow and I are actively working on a basic needs master plan in collaboration with our committee. Again, that outlines what we're going to be doing over the next 3, 5, 10 years to ensure basic needs security in our student population. Some campuses are organizing what are called these Ohana food distributions. These are food bank distributions where literally the Hawaii Food Bank comes to a spot on or near their campus and large-scale distribution of foods take place. We're kind of figuring that out through trial and error right now. And then Rainbow and I are working on a number of, longer term initiatives around outreach and education. And that might be something that we can also pull you folks into during your year as a VISTA volunteer. So yeah, that's kind of a little snapshot of what we've been up to and why we've been up to it. And I will pause here and then Rainbow and I can answer any questions you might have. Hi, Matt.
Thank you, Rainbow, and thank you, Albie.
Yep.
I mean, there's an incredible amount of information and work that's been done. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more about how we might be able to support with the cataloging, especially. So I think what I'm hearing is that the findhelp.org resource is something that can be developed further, and that might be something that we can assist with. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If so, maybe I know it's just it's kind of emerging, so maybe just like think out loud with us about what you're thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And Rainbow, please chime in. So this findhelp.org is a new database that doesn't have a comprehensive set of assets that is grounded in our community. So it may not have the KKVs and the YNI comps and other things that are in our community that the local population knows about and relies on. So Rainbow and I are going to do an orientation with the engineers at findhelp.org. They're going to teach us exactly how we need to deliver information to them to make their database more robust. And then we'll turn to you guys, or we'll have you in on this orientation session. And then we'll organize a little, if there's a few hours of your time, VISTA volunteers, that we can borrow, then we're going to make sure that we have some, Google Drive, and we are listing off all these resources that we think are critical to make that database most robust. And then we send it off to the Find Help people and they integrate it into the database. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, Rainbow, you want to talk about our basic needs master planning and some of our ideas around pulling some of these folks into it?
Sure. So we are currently going through the long and tedious process of creating a UH Basic Needs Master Plan. And we're working with the Hope Center, and some of you have, Albie presented on that data that they collected as well. We're working with them to create this master plan. And of course, master plans are generated by research. And so basically what's gonna need to happen is we're going to have, 5 to 10 hours, if even that much is allowed, focusing on research for basic needs master planning and basic needs resources in any way possible. And so we'll probably utilize that to create some sort of literature review so that we can, compare contrast between different authors, see what the research is all about, and then also generate the next steps that are best appropriate to serve system population of students, and that includes also University of Hawaii, Native Hawaiian population as well. And of course, being a student, we know that that's very unique specifically here to Hawaii. There is no other community like our Native Hawaiian population anywhere else in the world. And so being able to really tailor the basic needs master plan so that it fits our Hawaiian students and our Pacific Islander students is crucial.
Great, thank you, Rainbow.
Very helpful.
Does that answer your question, Matt? So really, we're thinking about two things: helping us populate the database, that's one, and the other is essentially using you guys as research assistants to identify best practices in university basic needs master planning, and we pull all that and we collate it and get it organized, and that becomes our University of Hawaii basic needs master plan. Of course, we're going to edit it significantly, but we can use you guys to kind of scour the internet to pull from these existing master plans that seem to be kind of oddly enough. I thought that we were going to be easily able to identify a university basic needs master plan, and I keep asking all of my colleagues, and they're just like, well, we have these documents that we can share with you. We went from basically 0 to 60, and now we might be inventing our own basic needs master planning and jumping ahead of the University of California system that is 10 years ahead of us in some of this work, right? So we're not going to create some fancy glossy, theoretical thing. We want, these are the best practices. This is why we are doing it. Here's the basic data, and here are the types of programming, education, outreach, research that we need to do now, and this is the price tag associated with them, and this is the staffing that needs to take place, because in our opinion, the work that you guys are doing on each of these campuses, those should be permanent positions, right? We shouldn't be fucking around with volunteer positions, with all due respect. We need to make sure that there are case managers on every campus in the University of Hawaii system. Rainbow has a full-time, tenure track line job so that she can continue to play this role. Right now, the University of Hawaii Basic Needs Committee is entirely volunteer, with the exception of Rainbow, who started only 2 months ago or whatever it was, right? So we're working off of shoestrings at this point, and we need to make this a priority.
Yeah, we know that context well. Do you have a hard stop, Rainbow and Albie, at 10:30?
I can continue for maybe another. I can go for another 10 minutes or so. Yeah.
And Rainbow, are you okay? Okay, I'm just gonna.
I'm good till 11. Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to ask for 5 to 10 max, and I really want to invite all of the voices that are on this call today. Navin and I have spent the last week or so just pouring everything that we can muster into providing a baseline foundation. It's been this kind of like fire hose roller coaster of just information, and so today was like sort of no exception to that. But what's really struck me, I was reflecting this on the weekend, is just the excellence that this cohort brings to bear. It was a really competitive field. There are over 100 applicants nationwide, that wanted these positions. And so it wasn't easy to select. There you go, 153, yeah. So I think we're well positioned to help, especially with like mapping of assets and resources. And Navin and I can work with you, Rainbow and Albie, to kind of figure out, okay, how does this make the most sense to integrate into the work plans? And we can also help you navigate some of the tensions that sometimes arise between campus and system initiatives, right? This is clearly both, and clearly has benefits to both. And we've also got some scar tissue and some lessons learned about how to do that effectively. So we'll work with you on that. Yeah. And really what I want to do is just do a closing round of sort of reflections, thoughts, questions. This is a time for, you know, any mihi or mahalos or any wonderings, or even just any, you know, thoughts that each of you want to share. And so I'm going to invite Carla, if you wouldn't mind starting off our closing round, and then you know our protocol, you can choose the next.
Mahalo, Matt. Mahalo, Rainbow and Albie, for your manao and for all the work that you're doing thus far. I definitely would take this back to my campus. We were at LCC, and we were talking about this, something about in this fine line of work last week. And today we have a meeting, so I would definitely bring up the finehelp.org. Yeah, I am. It's amazing. It's amazing, amazing, amazing work. So mahalo, and I'll popcorn over to Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you for sharing everything today. I was really shocked actually by insecure with campuses. Like, I think I felt like it's something everyone experienced to some degree, but like over 40% was pretty shockingly high for me. But I'm glad that there's like a pathway that you have for us to contribute to this too. I'm looking forward to discussing this with my counterpart at WCC, and yes, seeing how we can contribute to this program as well. I'm gonna popcorn it to Laurel.
Great, thanks. I'm just so shocked to learn that the percentage of students with food insecurities is so large. I had no idea. And yeah, just ready to get rolling on however we can help support the project. Looking forward to it. Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Ellie and Rainbow, for sharing this very valuable information. I'm really going to take this with me because I'm already very involved in the food pantry here. I think this week we got over 2,000 pounds of food to KCC that we're going to share out. And I'm definitely also going to share the finehelp.org website that I had no idea was available to students. I'll popcorn it to Anya.
And mahalo for the amazing work you're doing. A lot of this is new to me as well, so I'm just processing, and I'm definitely going to bring this over to my next meeting with my supervisor and as I talk to everyone at UH Hilo. But you mentioned if we had a few hours to spare to kind of learn, and I'm just saying I definitely have more than a few hours because I'm really interested in wanting to help with this in any way that I can. So I'll popcorn it over to Charlotte.
Yeah, thank you all for all of this work and sharing this information with us. It definitely is really sobering to think about these numbers. But I am really interested in this research and the finehelp.org. And I feel like this is something that when we all put our heads together, we can really make a difference in. So I'm excited to work with you all more on this. And I will popcorn it to Rachel.
Hi, yeah, I just want to say thank you for that presentation and for, sorry, I see faces that seem shocked with, I guess, my audio. But yeah, I just want to say thank you, and I am pretty shocked with the numbers that we learned about today. And it kind of is motivating for me to step into it and get the ball rolling on helping to be a campus resource for the people on campus. So thank you, thank you. I'll popcorn it over to Navin if you want to say anything.
Thanks, Rachel. I just want to mihi, Rainbow, and Albie for the work you've been doing, and with the vigor you've been working at it with. I mean, I really appreciate Albie, what you said about we're not looking for some theoretical plan, but we're looking for a master plan, like of actual actions to take and recommendations. That is so refreshing to hear, that you're very serious about this. And yeah, just looking forward to working with you and seeing how we can help. And I also just have one question. Maybe we can ask this later about the food donations and I guess like the combination of food donation and educational outreach, how it can be combined into one kind of operation where you give out food and give out information at the same time, and this kind of work. Maybe we can talk about that later. Yeah, just thank you. I mean, this website is incredible. I had no idea it existed. It's so comprehensive and solid. So thank you.
Nice. Thank you, gang. And thank you, Rainbow. And thank you, Albie. Really appreciate you folks, all of your work, all that you bring to the table. Such excellence and rigor and care and compassion. It's really exemplary. And so I really, one of the things I most appreciate about your work is that you're modeling what it looks like, right? To be engaged and solutions, not just solutions oriented, but like, solutions action kind of thing. So going forward, that was super helpful, Abby, to have you articulate in the chat, like the two key areas really simply. We've got a bit more of onboarding. Many of our team are meeting with their supervisors, site supervisors for like the first time this week, and that's a process orienting to their campuses. So what I'm thinking is Navin and I will reach out to follow up 2 or 3 weeks out from today with you folks. We have 4 more incoming vistas that'll round out all of the campuses. They start mid-April. And over the summer is probably when we'll really have the bandwidth, right? Because a lot of the campuses are like, oh, Earth Month and, all this other stuff. So this is just know that we're in this kind of sort of foundational phase, and that by month 3, that's when we'll really be able to roll up our sleeves and go to work. So it gives us some prep time, I guess, is what I'm sharing. But yeah, I will turn it back over to the both of you to close us out formally with our time today. I know you have other commitments and places to be.
Rainbow, you wanna start? I just threw our contact information. I think you have it from my spamming you via email, but just in case you need to reach out to Rainbow and I, that you have our contact.
Yeah, thank you folks for taking the time to kind of just clear your schedules to learn about the importance of food insecurity and basic needs insecurity and how prominent it really is across the United States, Hawaii, and especially in students in higher level education. So it's definitely something that we're going to have to address, whether the University of Hawaii system likes it or not. It's going to be something that we're going to have to talk about and, make space for this and create a capacity to take care of this because it needs to be addressed. So thank you, folks.
And I would just say that, yes, thank you for organizing this, Navin and Matt. I know you guys did a lot of behind the scenes coordination to bring these folks into the system to collaborate with us. And thank you folks in advance for the work that you'll contribute to, helping students address their basic needs and security. And I would say, as a kind of a point of analysis is, thank you, Matt, for kind of pointing out that as an academic, I'm very interested in solving for real world problems, and we can, I feel like what I'm doing in the SCFS program and with Rainbow as one of my students was to integrate theory and to practice in order to change the world. Otherwise, I think higher education is, as we face increasing and compounding crises, higher education, unless it follows that model, is going to be increasingly incapable of actually addressing the challenges that we face. And it's going to increasingly become a bastion of the elite, and people who are not well positioned socioeconomically and politically are going to be suffering, and they are not going to have the type of education that allows them to actually do things in the world that we need to do immediately. And so I appreciate the acknowledgement, Matt, that there's modeling going on here. Like this, I see this work as part of my students' education. This isn't some separate project. This is and was a part of Rainbow's education, is actually doing these studies. And I also say that, this is not the be all end all. Like, connecting students to, and faculty, staff, whoever needs it, to basic needs resources is not a solution. This is a band-aid for a socioeconomic and political crisis that is manifesting itself in terms of basic needs insecurity. And so I also try to keep my eye on the structural circumstances that generate basic needs insecurity. And that's a political project that we also have to have our eye on, because we can do band-aids all day, right? And waste all of our time and energy, but there's a power imbalance, right? And that power imbalance needs to be addressed. So we got to deal with the bullshit, the fallout of a highly inequitable society and structural racism and histories of colonial occupation, and that have set into motion some of the things that we're experiencing now. But the larger project is we got to change structural circumstances so that society is more equitable and we don't constantly keep manifesting basic needs insecurity. So we'll talk more about that as we move further along the line in this conversation.
Oh, you're so stone cold precise in how you articulate challenges and solutions. I could listen to you for ages. But we're over time already, so I want to let you folks get to your other responsibilities. But thank you very much. We'll be in touch. Yeah.
Great.
Ahoy ho, everyone.
Yeah, ahoy ho. Rainbow, I can follow up if there's anything you want to chat about. I sent everybody the PowerPoint, so you have all that stuff. Okay. All right.
Thank you.